port group, for example, for vMotion or for fault tolerance logging or for management traffic. Now in this situation, I don't want to use any of these services across this connection because I want to bind this specifically for use by my storage network. I'm going to choose the next button here. If I create that connection, I have to be able to give it an IP address because this is a VM kernel port. Now the IP address I'm going to use is 192.168.0.204 with a 24-bit subnet mask. And default, the VM kernel default gateway still remains 192.168.0.1. Remember, I'm going to be using this here in an upcoming nugget for iSCSI connections. And iSCSI connections at the initiator and at the target side have to have an IP address for them to be able to route traffic back and forth. So let me choose the next button here and then finish to actually complete the process. And you'll see now that I've created a secondary switch for use by storage with a second physical adapter, VMNIC1, that's going to be used for passing that storage. This is just the first step that's required to actually make that connection, and I'll finish some of the other steps in an upcoming nugget. I think it's the next nugget actually on storage. There is one last thing that we want to talk about here at this point, and that are the additional services that we might want to add in to this VM kernel port for the purposes of the management network. Let me choose Properties here, and I want to go back here to the management network, and I want to choose Edit here. You'll see that I have the same option of choosing a network label, management network, and the VLAN ID, which I can change or adjust if I want. And then down here at the bottom are the 4 services that are available for me: vMotion, fault tolerance logging, and management traffic. Let's assume that I want to actually combine my management traffic with my vMotion traffic over this same interface. I would do so by checking the box here marked Enabled, and that would allow me to do both vMotion and management traffic over that same network card. If I choose fault tolerance logging, you'll notice that an error box will pop up here if I try to hit the OK button that reminds me that fault tolerance logging tends to have a lot of heavy bandwidth associated with it. And so it's generally not a good idea to actually turn fault tolerance logging on the same connection that's being used for other things like vMotion and management traffic. Now when I do that, I may want to go through and adjust, for example, IP settings, or I may want to go and make specific changes here and override the default settings that I applied to the vSwitch for security, for traffic shaping, or even for NIC teaming. You'll notice how all of these have the ability to override these by checking the checkbox and then putting in some sort of different setting here for this configuration. Now that I've done this, though, I know that I'm going to add and make vMotion operate over this existing management network and as well as management traffic. If I click the OK button here and close, you'll see that now I've configured the vSwitch appropriately for this server. Now you have to be very careful here because once you complete configuring that for the first server, well, if you go back, you'll notice the second server does not automatically pick up that configuration. And so anytime you make any kind of configuration with a server using a vSphere standard switch, you're going to want to make sure that you take good notes on which configurations you've set so that you can apply those to all of the other servers that make up your vCenter environment. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've really talked about all the different steps that are necessary to be successful with vNetwork standard switches. We talked about all the different capabilities that are available with the vNetwork standard switch and also some of the ways in which you may configure VLANs or even not configure VLANs for a vSphere implementation. We talked about the switches themselves and then VMNICs and ports and port groups and network services that can be applied to those standard switches, and also some of the policies like load balancing, failover, traffic shaping, VLAN, and even jumbo frame support. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.